Today, we are lucky enough to have Debra Hernandez with us. Debra currently serves as the Executive Director of the Southeast Coastal Ocean Observing Regional Association, which is SECOORA for short. And SECOORA is one of 11 regional partners in an overall U.S. ocean observing system. It's a nonprofit. The SECOORA specifically operates in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And their mission is to catalyze and integrate the efforts of multiple observing interests to deliver user-defined products that save lives, conserve the marine environment, and support the economy. So I'm sure Debra's going to tell us a lot more about what that means, but really the idea is that they have a lot of modes of measurement, observation, and they share all of that with the public, and that includes research institutions, coastal managers, and so a whole variety of what you might think of as customers, which we'll hear more about. So Debra is a civil engineer in coastal and ocean engineering, management and policy. She served on the National Academy's Ocean Studies Board and the Ocean Research and Resources Advisory Panel. And she also currently serves on the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium Program Advisory Board and a chair of the IOOS Association, International Ocean Observing System, right? IOOS, yeah.
Integrated, so close.
Oh, integrated, right. She graduated from Clemson University and is a native of Charleston, where she still lives. And so, Debra, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks so much, David, for that fabulous introduction. I'm going to share my screen. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Can I get a thumbs up? Y'all are seeing the screen and hearing perfect, me? Okay, yep. Wonderful. I'm going to go fast. We're doing a ton of really exciting things, and hopefully there'll be some questions, and if not, folks will learn how to get a hold of me as we go through these slides. So David's already introduced me, so I'll skip that part except to say, go Tigers. I'm laid out my presentation today in three parts. First, to give you some background on the Integrated Ocean Observing System and SECOORA. Then I'm going to transition to talking about a number of technologies that are currently in use, both traditional or older technologies, as well as some new ones or new for SECOORA that we've begun investing in the last couple of years. And I'll conclude by talking about data management and analysis, as well as product development, that integration piece that brings, transforms the observations into information for people on the coast. So a coastal ocean observing system has many components, from hardware to humans. We gather that information and use it to support the people and communities that are along the coast. I'm going to ask you to take three messages from my talk today. First, that there's an ever-expanding list of technology options to gather data. And luckily, they're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Data management is absolutely critical. It's a cradle to grave type component of any sustained observing system. And if you don't think about that, you're going to have problems when you get to the end of your project. And then finally, don't forget the human capital, whether it's the technologists you need to operate these systems or analyze the data, or the stakeholders that you want to engage, because it's not very valuable to collect a bunch of data that nobody wants in the end. So in terms of background, SECOORA is part of a federally authorized program, so like the Clean Water Act, and it began out of communities like the folks participating today, ocean scientists. Many ocean scientists think in terms of large marine ecosystems, so that's how we ended up with the regional construct that we have now. There are 11 regions that are part of the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System, and they also formed an association. We've had continued political support for our work from both sides of the aisle, both in terms of the legislative content, the delivery of data for the nation, but also in terms of funding, in that we've been able to transition the program from a series of science projects to a long-term sustained network. So again, a bit of a different timeline on that work. It began with the Office of Naval Research and NOAA and the Consortium for Ocean Leadership. They pulled together 17 federal agencies and the Ocean Science Community, hosted a couple of workshops, came out with some recommendations that were included as part of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy. And then NOAA stood up the first integrated ocean observing system, or IOOS office. So they became the federal agency lead. And then finally, President Obama signed the federal legislation in 2009. And then the last day of last year, December 31st, 2020, we were reauthorized, and the act is called the Coordinated Ocean Observing and Research Act. If you need federal money to do your work, you need a federal agency to be your home, where those federal dollars go. So for the country's ocean observing system, that's at NOAA. The work we do aligns perfectly with their mandate as a mission-driven science agency working on oceans and coasts and delivering weather and climate information for the nation. This is the entire system. There are 11 regions stretching from the Caribbean all the way out to the Pacific territories. SECOORA is here in the Southeast. We cover both Carolinas, Georgia, and all of Florida. We do share the West Florida shelf with our sister organization in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a ton of collaboration that occurs across the regional associations. And then we partner with the NOAA ICE Program Office and other federal agencies to accomplish our mission. So I'm going to shift now to SECOORA, what we're doing here at the region. SECOORA is a nonprofit. Our members include a number of academic, private sector, nonprofit companies. The work I'm going to talk about today is a representative of what all our partners do. I'm a generalist, so I have a very broad knowledge of the topics that I'm going to be discussing, but I'm extremely grateful to be working with experts across the spectrum of ocean science to do our work. So as I've mentioned, SECOORA is primarily funded through a NOAA, a 5-year cooperative agreement. We also do a regional level plan called a Regional Coastal Ocean Observing System Operational Plan. We do that ahead of writing this 5-year proposal. We query the ocean science community and the stakeholder community to identify priorities. Then we host an open competition. Anyone can apply to be part of our 5-year proposal, which then turns into this cooperative agreement. Where we ended up through this last round, and we're just now starting year 1 of a new 5-year cooperative agreement, is with 3 levels of projects. You'll see on this graphic here on the left. The things in teal are the ocean observations that we've been doing for a number of years. So these pie-shaped squares are our high-frequency radar footprints. This overlap areas where you get the really good surface currents. These teal lines are a depiction of the glider missions that we've been running in the South Atlantic Bight. We also have a number of buoys, which are these circles here in teal off the Carolinas and off the West Florida shelf. All those things will continue. We're adding some new things. With level funding, we'll be able to also add 2 new buoys off the east coast of Florida, a new buoy off of Charleston Harbor, and add some additional glider missions on the West Florida shelf. If we see significant increases in funding, we're going to add a host of other projects, including more glider missions, some animal tagging, some new wave buoys in South Florida, some ocean acidification buoys in the Keys and the Indian River Lagoon, some web cameras. And what's not depicted here is about 200 new water level stations that are going to go throughout our region, and those are going in at the gold level. I love this graphic because it integrates all the work we do. Today, I'm going to talk primarily about all our observations, but just quickly, the work SECOORA does is bounded by our governance and management framework. I have a board, a staff, etc. We're driven by three major stakeholder themes around ecosystems, coastal hazards and climate, and marine operations. And based on those needs and priorities, we collect observations from a variety of different sensor types, which I'll talk about in more detail. Those observations feed into the development of various products around harmful algal blooms, sargassum, fisheries management, water quality, hazards, etc. We also fund modeling work, including hopefully, sorry, Siri's talking to me today too much. And then finally, we also support some human frameworks with these affiliated networks around resilience, animal telemetry, ocean acidification, and then the new water level network, which is just starting this year. So let me shift now to talk about observing technologies. These are pictures of just some of the types that we fund. I'm going to take a very high level breeze by the details. I'm very excited, as I mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of new development that is making sensors cheaper, smaller, easier to operate. And that's leading to a lot of great new understanding about our coastal environment. This is a quick video of the deployment and collection of one of the buoys operated by our partners at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. The maintenance of these buoys requires a pretty good size research vessel to get them maintained. This is a quick shot of the entire network of buoys we support. It's about 13 in the gray rows spread across the Carolinas and the West Florida shelf, one here off of Georgia as well. The blue colored ones are the new ones we'll be adding in the next 5 years, which I mentioned previously. Across the top here, you see the different parameters that they can collect, from wind and waves to water temperature, salinity. Some are equipped with current and water quality sensors as well. And notice also the deployment month and year. Some of these buoys have been in operation since 1998. So we're beginning to approach a record that can help inform climate changes in our coastal ocean. SECOORA, when we deploy an asset, our intent is to sustain it for the long term. The only reason we wouldn't is if we got the feedback from stakeholders that data that was being collected is no longer needed. So some of the applications from buoys, the obvious ones that collect wave data, for example, when hurricanes are passing. So the data is used in near real time for marine weather forecast, over the long term to document changing water temperature in chemistry. It's also used to provide situational awareness for search and rescue and safe navigation. Now, the cost of the ones you see in the video and over here to the left is around $200 $150,000 in initial capital investment. Annual maintenance is between 50 to 100K. But there are also some low-cost sensors that are available now. If waves is the only thing you're interested in, you can get a $5,000 pretty accurate wave sensor, get it deployed from a small boat, and be getting data that can really help with communities' needs for wave information. The buoys also support our storm product. It's we call it Eyes on the Storm. It's available via our portal, hurricane.portal.SECOORA. But for every storm since 2008, all the way up to the Hurricane Larry and the tropical depression that is out now, you can access the latest available data, get the track from the National Hurricane Center, get a pop-up along any place along the track of the latest data and information on that storm. So that's just one application of our buoy data. I'm going to shift now to our high-frequency radar program. This is hard to see, but the radar are primarily a series of antenna. So they're these vertical brown painted to be hidden antenna that have to get planted along the beachfront. SECOORA operates two types. Both have a series of transmit antenna. This is a plan view of the ones in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The transmit antenna, there are 4, and then the receive antenna, we have 8 in this configuration. Sometimes that goes up to 12. They're cabled together. The cable here is attached to the bottom of this boardwalk, and then they're connected via offshoots from that main line. And the radar itself is housed inside a trailer. Let me back up. You can see that a little better. It's got a big computer system in it. It has to be air conditioned. The one in Myrtle Beach is actually on a trailer, so it can be moved in the event of a storm. These are also fairly expensive initial capital investments, around 200K, and cost 50 to 100K a year to maintain, depending on how accessible they are. And what they do is they bounce a signal out over the ocean that's returned by the ocean surface and waves, and you get these nice surface current maps. Excuse me. This is a picture of the surface current map from the radar operated by Dr. Nick Shea out of University of Miami. So this is right off of Miami and Biscayne Bay. The warmer colors are the high-speed Gulf Stream moving quickly past the southern end of Florida. The data does go directly to the SECOORA data portal, as well as the National Data Assembly Center. The U.S. Coast Guard uses the data in their search and rescue operations. Ocean modelers pull in the data to help tune their model and to do comparisons. It's also used for a number of transport analysis, whether we're talking HABs, spills, or fish larvae. Having this sort of real-time surface current map can make a huge difference, as you can imagine, with search and rescue and with other sorts of analysis of what's happening in the coastal ocean. So I'm going to shift now to gliders, which are underwater autonomous vehicles, or UAVs. These can be deployed from a smaller ship and recovered from a smaller ship, depending on the seas and how far off they are. Sometime marine life, I don't know if you can see that, there's a turtle hanging out with this glider right here. They can be equipped with a number of sensors. They're driven from a computer on land. They go up and down in the water and surface to limiter their data back to shore. So they do provide data in near real time as well. Their capital cost, depending on how loaded they are, is again in the $250K range. And to operate a mission for us in the South Atlantic runs between $50,000 and $70,000 per mission. The missions usually run up from Florida and then get plucked out of the ocean off of North Carolina somewhere. One of the more exciting applications with this glider data that we're involved with is a collaboration at the national level with our regional associations from the Caribbean, the Gulf, the Mid-Atlantic, and then us in the South Atlantic, along with NOAA and Navy. And y'all are aware, I'm sure, living in Florida, that the National Weather Service is doing an amazing job predicting hurricane track, and a good job with intensity, but they're working hard to improve their prediction of hurricane intensity. A lot of the data that feeds the national models is surface ocean data from satellites. What the gliders provide is data from underwater. So it gives information on salinity and temperature that can have a huge impact on whether a hurricane intensifies or not. So all during hurricane season, we are running gliders off of the coast. One got dropped in the water by our partner at Skidaway just yesterday, with the hope of pulling the data from the glider. It goes to whoever the operator flows. Then it goes to the SECOORA data portal, which feeds up to the National Glider Data Assembly Center. Then it goes through a few more places to the global telecommunication system and into our nation's operational ocean model and hurricane models. And this graphic here shows a comparison between Angus, which is the name of the glider, and its data to a model, one which does data assimilation of the glider data and one which does not. And you'll see you get a much better alignment of the ocean temperature if you have that glider data to feed the model. All right, so that's it for the more traditional observing technologies. And I'll say also the more expensive ones. I'm going to talk next about some newer sensors that are a little more low cost. And I'm going to talk about them in terms of the application, sort of why we've branched out to this new observing technology. So I'm sure all of you know that sea level rise, increased flooding is a huge problem in our region. Probably most of you also know that NOAA operates an amazing national water level system. The problem is that system isn't available in all the places where people need data. So this initiative is looking to create a regional level, water level network. We're going to be installing stations across the Southeast and then also working with the stakeholder community to figure out how best to get them that data. We have an amazing set of 4 different expert teams. We have Nicole Elko leading a team from the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association, partnered with one of the sensor companies, Hahonu. Then Georgia Tech is led by Manu Di Lorenzo, Coastal Carolina University and FIU led by Paul Gaze, and Florida International University led by Tiffany Troxler. And so we'll be deploying these in situ aquatrol and ultrasonic max biotic water level sensors. We're going to deploy approximately 200 over the next 5 years. They will all be telemetered in near near real time, either via cellular or low RAN, which is a local area network. And they are also all being surveyed into NAVD 88. So they are not as accurate as the NOAA water level system. That's really the gold standard. But for many applications, particularly at community level, they're accurate enough to meet needs. There are a lot of words on this slide. The take-home message here is we have a plan. We're deploying these sensors both along the coast and inland as well, where we're seeing increasing flooding problems in our communities. We'll, depending on the level of funding, deploy between 190-ish to 220-ish. And as we talk about this network, we're seeing more and more people want to join with us in deploying these sensors, which cost around $2,000 all in with the telemetry and everything. This is a map of where they're going in North Carolina, and we're working on maps of where they'll be going in the other states over the next couple of months. We're also standing up an advisory committee of a number of federal programs, NOAA, USGS, as well as community and state partners to help us make sure we're meeting the community needs for information and developing an interface that will serve their needs and provide alerts in a format that they can understand and that can enable them to make decisions, whether it's about deploying cops to put out cones and mark roads as flooded, or to tell homeowners when it's safe to go back home. This next project I'm going to talk about is using another low-cost technology, web cameras, which are sort of ubiquitous both along the coast and lots of other places. They're another low-cost technology that we just started working with in the last couple of years. They're between $3,000 and $5,000 in terms of buying the camera and keeping it maintained and operational. This is another partnership project between SECOORA and experts at the University of South Carolina, University of California, Santa Cruz, University of North Carolina, Wilmington, Axiom Data Science, who's SECOORA's data provider, and NOAA, in particular, Greg Dusak, and other colleagues with the National Weather Service. So the goal of this effort is to stand up this low-cost observational data set and operationalize a national network that would automate processing the video into information that folks need, either for situational awareness or to help improve models. So Axiom is handling the data management and integration. They're going to stand up a web interface that will provide information to camera operators, somebody who wants to deploy a new camera to collect information, make some recommendations about the types and how they should be deployed, how to configure and get data from it. It's also going to provide to researchers access to the video in selected formats that enable them to do various types of analyses. It's also going to provide a common architecture so that somebody who's working on rip currents can also be aware of a situational awareness tool, and they can interact to provide back to stakeholders and users the information they need, again, to make decisions. So University of South Carolina is developing the situational monitoring and reporting tool. They're using various machine learning algorithms to count people and set up this menu of alerts for users so that community leaders and first responders can sign up for alerts and get notifications when people are on the beach, when the waves are big, when there's a high probability of rip currents. Another team led by Dr. Alex Pang out of UC Santa Cruz is working with a couple of machine learning AI techniques to use video to detect rip currents, and is collaborating with NOAA to use that to validate rip current models and forecast actually across the country. And then finally, Dr. Joe Long with the University of North Carolina, Wilmington is using the video to develop some tools to analyze water levels and dune erosion on the beachfront. So a lot of potential exciting applications. We just finished year one of this 3-year project. The bulk of the funding is going to development of these machine learning tools and then setting up the data management architecture. Again, starting here in the Southeast, but with the potential to grow to the nation. Moving on to acoustic sensors, which is finally enabling a much clearer link between all of the mid-ocean data that oceanographers have collected for years and tying it to the marine life data that you can get from acoustic sensors, which again are a relatively low-cost technology. This particular project is a collaboration with Jim Locascio at MOTE Marine Lab and folks at the University of South Florida who operate a station, water quality and mid-ocean station at Big Carlos Pass. There are generally 2 types of acoustic receivers, the kind that listens for sounds in the marine environment, and then the kind that are tags, which are put in various marine life and ping periodically and can be detected by acoustic receivers so that you can map where marine life travels. The big challenge with acoustics is the data management. Our ability to collect the data has far outpaced the ability to analyze it and get information from it. So we're funding an additional project to build libraries of labeled data to train machines, i.e. machine learning, so that you don't have to have a person analyze the data, but can rather use these AI algorithms to give you the information you're looking for on the types of marine life, their period, when they're in particular places, what changes in the marine environment might drive their presence or absence. So that's an ongoing piece of research. A second investment we're making with acoustics, excuse me, is with Dr. Eric Monti out of the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, who's deploying passive acoustic receivers in estuaries in South Carolina and learning about how changes in the marine environment, including increasing noise, affect the presence or absence of marine life. And the idea here, again, is to use some AI machine learning to analyze the data and develop this at the pilot scale that could potentially be expanded to other places in our region. So I'm going to close by talking a bit about our data management and cyber infrastructure, which is absolutely the glue that keeps SECOORA operating and allows us to leverage and integrate all these various sensors and other investments we're making in the region. SECOORA is certified, as are all of the other IOOS regional associations, that our data meets federal standards, both for accessibility, for management, for quality assurance and quality control, and for long-term archiving. So cradle to grave data management is what we do. Axiom Data Science is a private company that's been working with SECOORA for 6 years now. They host our data portal and provide support to all of our observation and data collectors. Each year, we're seeing a growth in the number of sensors that we're aggregating the data from. We're seeing a growth in the data layers that are available, growth in the moving platforms that we're funding, and also in the development of various products and tools that turn the data into information, like Text-to-Buoy, which will let people sign up for alerts for their buoy of interest. The hurricane tool I've already mentioned. For each observation station in our network, there's a rich metadata page with pictures and all kinds of information that gets you right back to the researcher who deployed the data and information. And we also are doing regularly enhancements so that our data portal is more user-friendly. There are a number of videos. There's a how-to video, for example, on how to use Eye on the Storm. Just a huge amount of analytical and graphic capability in our portal that we're hoping folks like those listening today can make use of. I haven't spent any time talking about models, but SECOORA also supports several modeling projects, including a regional scale model led by Dr. Roy He out of North Carolina State University. Models fill in where we don't have observations, and they absolutely are critical to helping us understand what's happening with the coastal environment. They're both integrating the observations and using our data management system. And they're also helping us understand where we need new observations because the models aren't doing a good job explaining what's happening in the environment. All of this leading to the realization that big data, complex modeling systems, data assimilation, all this is requiring that we invest pretty significantly in our data management and cyber infrastructure to make sure that we can turn all this data collection into useful information that supports all kinds of decision-making on the coast. And you can find out where all this data is on our website. I want to also mention the human capital that we invest in via 4 affiliated programs. They're all open, so anybody can join. You can get to them through the affiliated programs tab on our website. So we have an acidification network, a disaster resilience partnership, an ocean data sharing initiative, and then animal telemetry network, the FACT network, which started in 2007, has over 283 members and is growing by about 10% every 6 months. So collecting data from the Southeast and beyond and aggregating it in one place. We also do have some student opportunities. So if you're a student, please check out those opportunities on our website. And I'm going to close by saying, I hope you got the message that there are lots of options technology-wise. You have to keep in mind your data management protocols in order to turn that into information. And you also have to invest in people to deploy, operate, analyze, and make use of the data. So hopefully there's a little time left. That's my last slide. I'm not sure if anybody's moderating or if I should just...
No, I'll be happy to moderate. So thank you so much. Let's give Debra a round of applause, either real life or fake reaction on Zoom applause. There you go.
Thanks.
So thank you very much. Obviously like a tremendous fire hose of data, but also just very many flavors. And so I think it's a lot for people to wrap their heads around, but I'll open it up to any questions from the Zoom room. I'll pop over to the YouTube and check if there are any questions there. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask Debra. And I can always prime the pump because I got a couple here.
I see one hand raised.
Yeah, Z, go ahead.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for the great talk. And it's really a great learning experience about these available data resources. And my research area is in the artificial intelligence for geospatial, spatial temporal data. And I want to ask your thoughts. Can you share thoughts about how AI can potentially contribute to this domain, given both there are physical simulation models and then there are also sensor observations? And from your experience, what role AI technology, machine learning technology will play for this?
Well, it's not my area of expertise. Let me say that first. But it's a place we're making investment because the data sets are so large, particularly when you're talking video and acoustic data. So where we're making investments is to create libraries so that the data can be analyzed more quickly, to create algorithms so that particular features can be pulled from data streams. And then we're also investing with a team that's going to establish some standards for different types of marine data analysis, starting with a look at video of corals, and then to do some training so that we have a library of tools and standards and best practices so that hopefully we can exponentially increase our ability to use this video and acoustic data to more effectively model and predict and forecast what's happening in the marine environment.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
So Debra, you said there's so many partners and stakeholders, and one of the things, it's a big, both, capital outlay and maintenance budget. And so presumably you're kind of on the hook to show who's using what and how many people are using this or that. So would you say, who's your primary data user? We know our perspective from the academic side, and going and grabbing the data is really useful, but do you have a feel for who's most using the data that you are collecting and stockpiling?
That's a great question. And it's hard for us to track, in part because we don't put any gates or firewalls on our data. It goes to a lot of the federal data banks, and people pull directly from there. But millions of users pull the buoy data, and it's anybody who wants to go out on a boat ride, to ocean modelers. And then more and more, we're hearing from coastal communities and coastal engineers who are looking to adapt to challenges of climate change and sea level rise, and want data on the wave environment, on changes in the shoreline and changes in water temperature. And then fisheries managers are another big user because the data really informs their management of fish stocks.
Yeah, it seems like you would want like a thank you card from everybody with the deal, so you could take it up to Washington.
Absolutely, a big pile. I will say, as part of our most recent proposal, we had 99 letters of support from charter captains to local and city governments, researchers, and then various state, federal, and nonprofit marine managers.
That's great.
Debra, I had a quick question about how much your data is integrated into other data sets out there. For instance, if I was to go to NOAA's Tides and Currents website and look at some sort of a tide gauge information, is your data integrated into that seamlessly so that there's a cohesion there? I mean, it sounds like yours goes up to some multiple levels of integration and then goes back out to these maybe national database. I'm just kind of curious how all that's glued together or how independent it is. So if I'm looking for certain types of information, do I exclusively go after your site and look there, or perhaps would I find your information already integrated somewhere else?
That's a work in progress, and unfortunately, there's not one answer. We have been funding some water level stations for a number of years and have followed NOAA's protocols so that they are accessible via their website, because we want people to be able to find it multiple places. With the new water level stations that the 200 we're adding, we're actually collaborating with the NOAA Currents and Tides program right now. They have a tiered data policy, and while we won't be shown where their sort of gold standard stations are, we plan to meet all their requirements so that when you go there, you'll be able to see the new stations that we're adding. But you can go to our portal and see not just the data we fund, but data from lots of other people. We do a lot of data rescue and data curation, as well as pull in federal data sets in our region. So I'm partial to go to SECOORA.org first and see if you can find it.
All right, great, thank you.
Thanks. I saw Natalie unmuted. You still have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So hey, Debra, this is Natalie Nelson.
Hey,
from
Natalie.
State. So my UF friends are kind enough to let me crash their webinar series. So I really enjoyed your presentation. It was fun to see all of the different projects that you're funding. And I'm really curious about the water level monitoring network project. So one thing I'm especially curious about is how you plan on connecting that network with being able to then estimate nuisance flooding. And so I saw that on one of your slides, but to give you a little bit of context for what I mean by that question, on the tides and currents data, they report a flood stage for each of their different stations, but often that flood stage is going to be basically the point at which you have water that's overtopping seawalls. I mean, it's going to be a really dramatic event. And so these other types of cases where, based on the depths of storm water outfalls, you might have flooding that's occurring far below that flood stage, but you really have to know more about the elevations of the roads, the stormwater system. And so that requires a lot of really local knowledge about that individual site. And it seems like with this network, there might be some cool opportunities to do that. So I'm just wondering, are you thinking about how to provide then estimates of nuisance flooding beyond what we see with the tides and currents network?
That's a fabulous question, Natalie. And it's something we are thinking about, and we're not there yet. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to loop you in. We do plan to benchmark against the available data from the NOAA system. We also, a number of our communities put in a little cash. They've contributed $500 and have committed to maintaining the sensors. So we'll be engaging locals to make sure we understand what tolerances they have, what's the critical elevations, and taking advantage of that local knowledge so that we can provide those sort of alerts about nuisance flooding. But we literally just a week or two ago got access to the money for this project and are sending out invitations for our advisory committee next week. So TBD, but I'll be happy to follow up with you as we make progress.
Thank you. Sounds great.
Let me tag onto that question. It's a very nerdy kind of a field hydrologist question, but have you already decided on Aquatrol 200 and purchased them?
So the most amazing thing happened. So I told you we had 4 expert teams coming in with this on this water level project. they came through this open solicitation that SECOORA ran, and we did not dictate the technology. So we let each team come forward with their preferred configuration and sensor. We are going to set up a test bed. It's actually going in Fernandina Beach on the pier there, which is near one of the NOAA, the National Water Level Observing Network stations. And we're going to do a comparison. We're going to try to document operational and a capital cost and provide that information back to the community so we can do a bit of an assessment about what works best. And I'm guessing you have an opinion.
We can talk about that later. Well, the good thing is they measure conductivity. So if you have all those stations and you have salinity data, that could be helpful, including for the things, Natalie was talking about. So, nuisance flooding of freshwater versus nuisance flooding of saltwater.
Right.
Has infrastructure implications and, of course, ecological implications. I've had my handful of challenges with all sorts of different sensors, perhaps particularly
the nature of field work, right?
Yeah. I don't know, Elliot, if you're out there on YouTube, you can send Debra an email too about your, anyway. So we are at 12:36. I don't want to keep folks longer, but I want to give another round of applause to Debra Hernandez for sharing her giant stack of data and basically all the opportunities to go and play with it and become, either contributing members or using, part of the using public. Thank you very much, Debra.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Real pleasure. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, we will see you next week. Everyone be well, stay safe, look after